Today's guest is one that's very, very special and very intriguing. We're going to be having Chimira on set with us. They are a multifaceted artist and theorist whose work primarily focuses on exploring African spirituality and Black queer liberation. This episode in particular invites you to open up your minds and open up your hearts to how life can be if you connect with the collective. So I'm very excited and very intrigued to see how this is gonna go, and I can't wait to have you guys with me. Okay. Whenever I put on my gloves like this, I always feel like a doctor.
You're a professional, bro.
My mom calls my clients my patients. I feel like she's really committed to the idea.
Like her dreams were fulfilled.
Do you get what I mean? She said, like, you work with blood? That's more than enough.
If she's telling her friends you're a medic.
Do you get what I mean? No, for real. Oh God, no cap. I was like, don't kill me. Chi, how are you today?
I'm very well, feeling very blessed. And again, as I said, this is very aligned for me. So I'm very happy, very happy. And thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's a shared gratitude, which I'm even more grateful for.
I feel like that's something I love about, guys, and this is going to be a big word, but the energetic ecosystem, right? Because when you put positivity into the world and you get positivity back, it multiplies.
Intentions.
Yeah.
Intentions matter. Like, I like to think of everything almost through a language of gardening. So, like, seeds are always important to me. And it also allows for seasons as well.
Wow. I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm really excited for this convo already. Okay. So my first question is, what are you getting? I know I'm holding it already, but what are you getting?
So this is an Igbo Uli symbol. And actually, there's different forms of it. There's the Onwa spiral, but I think this, at least, I'm going to refer to it as Akaraka, which is also destiny in Igbo. And it's quite interesting to have it placed here on my hand because it also translates to like Aka, like your hand is Aka, so like destiny is in your hands. So that's also interesting to like, and I'm a firm believer that you choose your own destiny, where you can actually be like the guide of your own destiny.
An author.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, okay, destiny on my hand.
I think that's very beautiful. And something else that I love about it is that the spiral in a lot of cultures are used for the universe and for universal energy as well.
And snake also, which is very, I really appreciate the snake, even though I'm very scared of the snake, but I'm trying to love the snake.
I feel like there's something very big to be said about the use or the demonization of snakes, especially in
through
Christian iconography. Exactly. And meanwhile, these are actually just beings created, and depending on your beliefs, these are beings of that create as well.
In parts of Igbo land, they're considered messengers, and they're that sacred that you cannot actually kill a snake. And animals thrive on instinct, so if they know that humans don't typically harm them, they can easily coexist with you. It's only if you're a continuous threat to them that they adapt towards knowing that,
that's actually very true. That's actually very true.
I also had this line where I once wrote, "Snake, I should love you." And that to me became like a symbol for loving things we've been conditioned to hate. Because I actually had like a very interesting story with a snake once that I immediately like saw the snake as like a very bad omen. And then time later I realized that, it was actually just a messenger for something. So it's like, how do you reconfigure your mind?
How do you perspective?
Exactly, perspective.
Okay, I'm already so jazzed up. I'm so jazzed
and
up.
It's also like continuity.
Yes.
Like, I also don't believe in linearity, so like there's no start, there's no end. It's just cyclical.
Going. It's just going, and whatever point it's at is the point it's at. Okay, awesome. So we're gonna start by stenciling you. So I'm gonna shave you if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
I'm really excited. You know this is gonna be a spicy one.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay.
I typically have no expectations for pain, so I'm just like, it is what it is, man. Like, I'll chest it.
I feel like one thing as well, like when I got my handpiece, because I do have like you can't see it in my glove, but I do have a handpiece that is the inspiration behind it is also the insipidity symbol of water, right? And it's like fluidity. So it's like triangles, triangles. And when I got the handpiece, it was like in a trade for trade with one of my with a Montreal artist, one of my favorite colored artists. Their name is Club Cliche. Shameless plug. I'm gonna stand by them. And it was painful. I would say it was like one of my most painful ones. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, I felt like I had so much to process at that point in time. Like I was going through it, like I was fighting.
Basketballs.
Like it was in the spiritual realm, bro. I was fighting like so much. Like I had like a really hard year, going through a breakup, all these things. And at that point in time, it was like this pain that I'm feeling is what is really reflected in my heart. And at the end of the day, moving...
So it materialized your pain.
Exactly. And I feel like that's something that I appreciate about tattoos. Pain therapy.
That's so interesting.
Pain therapy. Because at the end of the day, it does symbolize that. It does symbolize being in pain and then the beauty that comes after, right?
And the fact that the pain is temporary.
It is, and it's always temporary. That's the lesson. That's always the lesson. It's always temporary. Okay, so I'm going to have you like spread out your fingers a little bit. Do you want the tip up or do you want the tip down?
Actually, like this? Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fucking sick. That's fucking sick. Hold it up, see how you feel about it.
Yeah, I love it.
I love the way it moves. I love the way it moves. I mean, no, the requirement is for you to absolutely love it.
No, I absolutely love it. As I said, like, for me, it's more so intentions, you know, like, and I already know the intentions behind this. Like, I'm not really a visual person per se in regards to perfection as well. I told you that I like mistakes. So not to say that this is even a mistake, but
yeah,
I'm
but like even like the little bits of imperfections.
Like I embrace like impromptu-ness. Like I'm more so like, okay, the first is what it is.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love that. I always call like the first, when we get it on the first try, I always call that a gold star placement because it's like, oof.
It's aligned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to first of all start by talking about the way that you create. Now, I kind of wanted to call you multidisciplinary, and I have called you multidisciplinary.
Yes, you have.
Right? So when I think of you, when I think of how you make art and how you create, it's less of, it feels like less of you're a multidisciplinary artist and more of you're just a creator.
Yes.
Like
yes,
you are an entity that creates.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I feel like that's very powerful. We're about to get started, okay?
Okay.
I will say, like, what do you feel like your journey, how does that feel?
It's okay.
Yeah. How do you feel like your journey with creation has been so far? What difficulties do you feel like you faced in this journey?
So I'm kind of wondering where to start this question from. And I guess like I'll contextualize it in just saying that I've been in Europe for a hot second now. And as someone that like my art, at least my visual art primarily like developed via like an interest in like my Black consciousness and just like my roots. And I think there was definitely a point where like developing my artistic practice, I was kind of like following suits of like a bunch of artists that were also co-creating alongside me, but more so on the online sphere. And everyone had like their exhibitions happening, everyone had like online posters, their online store. Like there was so many like, I guess I was seeing the business of art.
Yeah, rather than...
like exactly. And I did feel like, oh, I want an exhibition or I want to like sell posters, I want to like do all these things that I'm seeing all these other incredible artists doing. And I think Yeah, art has never been like a full-time thing for me. Like I've never had the privilege per se to like entirely pursue art. Like I got into art school, but it was very expensive, so I couldn't do that. Or even like my parents didn't necessarily encourage that.
Even like
as
respect
well.
it, especially as a Nigerian child. Right?
Exactly. So I think like art has always been like the other thing I was doing alongside school. So it was definitely like a very personal practice that developed in my bedroom, wherein I was witnessing artists that had studios. I was witnessing artists that had like
That one, you know, that one. Because I've been dancing around the idea of getting a studio, and I'm still figuring it out. But I'm just like, even feeling like you're not really a serious artist because of that.
And like
that one was loud. Please continue.
And I definitely like I eventually was able to get a studio and stuff. And there was a time where I was doing multiple exhibitions, but at the same time I was still dealing with like just the issues of like the commodification of my arts, because I suddenly realized that my art at least like is an offering of consciousness as opposed to an offering of a product. And over time, especially when I reached a point where I couldn't even afford to make art, I realized how much of a commodity-based practice it is. Like artists, or rather the institution of art, they're looking for art that can last. They're looking for art that like increases in value over time. So
it's
your materials matter. Exactly, your materials matter. Like the paint you're using, like the preservatives you're using. Like there's so many different like material facets to the creation of art that I suddenly became very, very bothered by. And like I think that's kind of what allowed me to like veer off into music. But yeah, like with creating art, I suddenly realized that, especially when I started dealing with all those like tensions, I suddenly realized that it was definitely a spiritual life practice, because the art suddenly became way more deeper to me when I couldn't afford to make it. Like when I couldn't, or when I also couldn't afford to start up an online store, so that even prevented me from like selling prints online. Like there were so many different things.
There's so many different roadblocks that you face.
Thank you, roadblocks. Like I experienced so many roadblocks that just had me like, man, I don't want to do this actually. Or rather, I don't want to do this in service of something that I don't think I entirely understand or I want to understand.
Yeah, I want to contribute to.
Yes.
I think that's very valid. I think, especially when it comes to like my painting, I had initially gotten into tattooing because I didn't want to sell my paintings, right? And like I was just like, yeah, because this feels really personal. I don't want to base my livelihood over this practice that I do that helps me think and breathe and live.
Yes.
But like I kind of got into tattooing, and I was just like, bro, but this is so real. Like I love this, and this is also another facet that I don't want to share with capitalism, but I have to pay rent.
Yes, survival.
But yes, please continue.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, like, especially in Europe, black arts is like very much hot. Like there's a lot of people that expect you to like sell your trauma and like slave history and this and that.
And even at exhibitions, having to repeat trauma over and over
and
and
just
over
deep expectation
again.
Like I've dealt with different types of white curators, and there was a time that I was like specifically being intentional about the type of institutions that were dealing with my art. But even as such, I found it to be such a very like political play, because you have very white institutions who hire like black curators actively look for you, and you're dealing with the curator not knowing the institution behind.
Exactly. It's very, you really have to like deep dive. And you have to deep dive while still also being hungry.
Exactly. And like even at times, like some of the black institutions I dealt with were either like overworked, underpaid. So like even their like engagements with me were very like frustrating on the premise of like,
or the fact that
they're missing deadlines.
For their
literally,
lives.
They're also struggling as well. So it's such like a joint, unanimous struggle in general. Yeah, like I also once did this huge commission for like an apartment building in Amsterdam in a very black area for a black neighborhood, and the whole premise was me like community engagement, making a piece that represents the community that lives within this building, just to find out that the building is going to be demolished in 3 years, and the company actually funding this art piece are the people
demolishing it.
Yes,
I was about to say, don't tell me it's about to get gentrified.
Don't
tell me it's about to get gentrified.
Very much so.
That's so upsetting. I feel like, being an artist is to live in your emotion. And it's very, very difficult to do that in a world that is so aggressively against your emotion.
Oh, yes.
And I guess like my next question is, because I do understand you.
I love the direction you're going in right now, because like, yeah, I'm literally I'm about to erupt. Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like knowing you, I do know you as and being someone that has been blessed and honored to know you from a very jump start point as well. Right, where like, you know, like what we're thinking about was not what we're thinking about now.
No.
Seeing your evolution and seeing how you evolved into the spiritual being that you are, that's so conscious and so connected to people's energies, and not trying to pander, so to say, not trying to perform for the Nigerian society you live in or European society you lived in.
Yeah.
You are in between. You are in this in between. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate wanting to create and wanting to live in your authenticity whilst still trying to survive and while still trying to like leave space to create? Like I feel like there's very much like a survival or thrive dichotomy.
Yes, but at the same time, right, like I think it's a journey of becoming, firstly and foremost. So for me, it's like I just acknowledge that I'm still developing languages that will forever be changing as I go. And I think especially adopting the strategy, and I love to talk about strategies and negotiations. Yeah. Because I think living within the conditions of the supremacy, you must negotiate the conditions of your existence. And as someone that's trying to live beyond survival, I have to negotiate in certain areas that will allow for my own becoming. And that allows and you just have to embrace a form of fluidity and allowing to know that there will be so many contradictions in your practices towards freedom. But I think Audre Lorde, who wrote The Uses of the Erotic, is someone that entirely radicalized me in my emotional states. Because she talks about how our deepest intuition, our deepest need for pleasure and joy is a great source for knowledge production. So the moment I realized that knowledge can actually be produced from non-forms of reason or irration, knowledge can actually be extracted or produced from just your deepest capacities for life and joy. That actual intuition to want to live well. To want more, the motivation. Yes, that motivation is actually a great site for so much I guess just intuition, period. Your guide, your destiny.
I find that something I really do struggle to decipher between intuition and trauma responses sometimes. Yeah. I find that something that I've been understanding more and more is that they sound very similar.
Yes, they do.
They're but when you zoom in, one is, somebody gave me the language, one of my favorite people gave me the language for it recently. It sounds very similar, but it is underlined by paranoia. Trauma responses, that is. And intuition tends to come a little bit more quietly. If that makes sense. It comes a bit more calm. I understand. Right? And I feel like that's something that I'm trying to learn to refine. What would you say?
Different for everyone, right?
I was going to say, what would you say helps you?
I mean, my sibling Malaga, shout out boy for days.
Period.
Kind of said this thing about anxiety coming from your stomach. And sometimes anxiety being intuition. And the moment I started actually thinking of my anxiety as intuition, I was like, oh wait, I don't know, there was sort of an understanding or a translation of sorts. Because by anxiety, I guess there's some days where I feel sometimes when something happens and then you're something said I shouldn't have done this. Yes. Or something said I should have this listened. Was going to. Yeah, and then I started actually paying attention to those feelings of when I feel that something, because it comes in a glimmer. Yeah. It comes and it goes, but then you remember.
And you also don't know if the thing is just chatting shit. If you're being honest.
That's very true. That's
it's just true. Is it am I just being a self-up? Or am I actually
But then that's what it's you have to sit with those feelings, right? You have to sit, I think you have to embrace everything that you embody sometimes.
Oh, embrace everything you embody. I don't know. I would like that on the screen. But yes, I love
embrace
that.
everything you embody, because I started to learn more and like just be in communication with my anxieties. And there are moments where I do realize it's just plain anxiety, but there are other moments where I identify again, like in my stomach, like when I can actually feel it in the pit of my stomach, I realize it's actually my intuition speaking. But at the same time, there was the time where I recently said I'm making friends with the voices in my head. So like actually just learning who's speaking in your mind and where your mind is speaking and where your soul is speaking. And sometimes I also, for me at least, the voices in my head also represent ancestral knowledge. There's certain things that, like, my common sense is ancestral, honestly speaking. There's things that I naturally know, or languages that naturally come to me.
And that you did not have to experience.
Exactly, I did not have to experience,
to know,
but it
or
came.
even see someone else experience. Okay.
So that voice
I
of
could definitely see
reason
that.
is definitely a voice of intuition that, like, I've come to, like, befriend in my mind. And I allow wisdom to come to me in different moments. But then I do also have like that inner bully in my head, of course.
Yes, because like we're human.
Of course.
Right? And not only are you human, but you're a human being who has navigated the world being raised as a woman. Right? And I like saying that specifically because even in like your experience of being gender diverse and being non-binary, and even with my experience of being non-binary, I feel like it can be very exclusionary to just say like as women.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like sometimes I just do it anyway just because at the end of the day, like whatever. But
I feel you so
but
hard.
it's like at the same time, like sometimes it's very important to specify and be like, you are raised with, that's how you're raised, regardless of like what the situation is. That's how you're raised, regardless of how you identify. That's an experience that you have, right? And I feel like it's very interesting because when you are raised as a woman, you are shame is almost built in, like as if they hid it somewhere. Like, you get what?
It's a chip.
It's like, do you get what I mean? Yeah. Shame is built in. Like shame is built in. So, and I know everybody at the end of the day, regardless of gender or like sex or whatever, right? Everybody is raised with shame, because also capitalism, also 100. Patriarchy, and this, that, and the third. But I feel like the experience of shame and womanhood, the relationship between shame and womanhood is very intertwined. And I think that's something that I would like to find out how you navigate, especially in your practice of creation.
It's quite interesting because I think also as a first daughter in my household, me getting tattoos was not really like my natural inclination. Like I also, like as a spiritual person, like I was very much a devout Christian at like certain moments and intervals throughout my life. And I was someone that kind of like frowned upon tattoos, or eventually I reached the point where I was like, I don't understand the need in them, or like I never really pictured myself like with tattoos. And I had a lip piercing also recently. So yeah, I used to tell people like I feel like a version of me would look at me now and genuinely be perplexed or like
what the hell's going on?
Like God help this babe.
Definitely.
And it was crazy because like even my family, like having the shock of seeing me, like because they hadn't seen me for a second, and suddenly I pulled up like with face piercing and tattoos and this and that, and like they were suddenly like, what is actually going on?
What's happening?
And I had to like really tell them it's not really about you guys, it's about me firstly and foremost. But then I also had to tell them, do you know the amount of shame I carry doing these things? So it's not even like I'm doing
it's
this
not as
from
if it's
a place.
easy.
So as in,
it's
like,
not easy. It's not beans. It's not
guy,
beans.
like I'm not even doing it from a place of like entire confidence per se. Like I'm doing it almost to like dismantle the shame that I feel within myself.
What's that thing that I absolutely loved in your bio? The ritual of refusal.
Oh yes, rituals of refusal.
Ooh, talk on that, please. Because I do feel like that connects to this idea of, pandering and having to like change yourself and your desires because of like the norms.
Yes, because of how you be perceived. Honestly, language matters so much to me because language carries so much ideology, and I think my biggest freedom practice was actually the moment I started to reconfigure the language through which I experienced this world. And I started like taking, I guess like when it comes to refusal, I realized that refusal cannot be like a an absolute practice per se. There isn't one way of refusal. And even as such, I guess like there was a time where I was even like reckoning with the idea of like, why does this sound like whenever I entirely reject the systems of this world, it almost sounds like suicide. Like it's not possible. Like why does entire refusal sound like giving up? Like why can it not sound like an otherwise way?
Yeah.
Even, but it's, at the same time, it's like people cannot imagine otherwise ways when
they're so stuck in their realities.
Yes, exactly. When these realities actually, like, you know, like it's then like you have to like pluralize our experience and our existence. So like, yeah, it was sort of like, how can I enact refusal in my day-to-day existence? Like, I especially borrowed this from Saidiya Hartman. I recommended her book,
Yes,
Beautiful
you mentioned.
Experiments. And she talks about like the day-to-day life of like Black people, but like she almost makes it seem revolutionary that our normal existence can actually be something that goes against systems without necessarily having to take an overt practice or method of doing so. Like you don't actually have to like go try tear down government buildings right now, or like there's ways of like practicing freedom in the more mundane aspects of our lives. So meaning that everyone can indeed practice freedom, and everyone can indeed embody freedom or revolutionary acts. Like you can refuse the system in little ways. So when I started like placing rituals of like refusal, it's like like exactly what kind of rituals, what kind of languages of refusal can I like establish in my life that allows me to figure some type of agency or power in my normal day-to-day existence.
And I would say what are some examples of rituals that you have?
So African time. I remember like when I moved to Europe, I had this like I was in school, I planned to like meet up with some friend from school, and she literally showed up like exactly like on the dot, and I was still like in my house like about to shower. And I remember that was such a huge like cultural shock, like people actually being on time and all. And like then understanding this thing of African time, which honestly is more so like, it's not like we purposely choose to be tardy, but it's more so like anything can happen. And so many things happen, like from the people actually at the venue of the site to the people trying to get to that site.
Exactly.
You know, so I kind of like, to me, African time is divine time. And there was a time where I very much felt oppressed by the structures of time. And that time allowed for some type of pressure, but like in this capitalistic, productive manner of like existence. So unlearning that for me was like, I will go in my own time. And I will do things in my own time as I feel they naturally align. And honestly, I've made my own transitions. I've made my own forms of alignments in just believing in my own natural time. And that also like alleviated me of so much anxiety.
And like stress.
And stress, right? And that to me was such a huge act of refusal. I was like, I refuse time. But like I refuse not like time as a general concept, but I refuse time in the way it's being propagated towards me. But yes, I embrace my own form of time, which I believe is highly divine. And
I feel like as somebody that also like lives with ADHD, time blindness is a really big thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was saying like off camera that like as someone that has ADHD, I feel like 24 hours in a day, I really do have 6 hours of like active consciousness where my mind is not, especially living unmedicated as well. Right? And I feel like with that, like I do understand the idea of like, hey, like, you know what, like sometimes things are just not going to be in the time that like people want
at all.
I think the thing that I try to practice, that I want to get better at practicing while still like leaving space for that, is communicating that.
Exactly. Like I think for me, it developed a form of communication around my time. Like I'm very transparent with how I operate with time. There was even a moment where like my friends would always be like, what time are we doing? I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm the type of person that I know, like each day is a new journey.
Each day is a new
like world. So I like to just like, I know how things will feel for me, like let's say the night before or the morning of, and then I'm able to communicate as I go. And I think a lot of people just know that I'm a very fluid person, and I'll know when I know. And I just allow for that type of alignment.
I feel like, so kind of going from here to your community, right? Because at the end of the day, like it's one thing to have these philosophies and be implementing them solely on your own with no support from people around you, and it's another thing to like have communities, because at the end of the day, I do feel like, especially with my case where like it's like connected to a disability or different ability, right?
Yeah.
It's like your society is what disables you, your community, your environment is what disables you.
Yeah.
If people are able to work with you in mind and work with, like
adapt or acclimatize to your
exactly.
own form.
So my question now is that how have you been building a community or what are key steps that you've used to build a community that reflects you or that leaves space for you? And all the wonderful, intricate ways you show up.
I think this is like a brilliant question because I'm definitely a community builder, and like my art is definitely rooted towards the idea of like collectivity. But I think especially in Europe, I dealt with a lot of like isolation, but isolation within like my own, like just being in very like, let's say being the only Black person in different buildings or different institutions of my life. And I guess back to Saidiya Hartman, she talks about like we operate in a form of a chorus. Like we have sisters singing the same song, but like singing the same song but differently, but it all combines towards this collective chorus of a song. But like let's say a song for freedom, a song of pain, a song of like just our collective experience. And the idea that like people are scattered around this world singing the same song as me was very beautiful, but still very isolating because you want to see these people.
Yeah, like
people
where
always
they
say you're
at,
not
though?
alone, but then you still do feel alone.
So why am I feeling that way?
Exactly. And then
No,
I
I
learned
feel
this
like that's
idea of
very
like
valid.
imagining the collective, and that was very radical. Like, what does it mean to actually like imagine a collective? Like
imagine even the people that you can't see that you
even
know.
and then that's where it becomes even more ancestral, because it's like, oh, okay, like your collective isn't just made of a current present, but it's also made of a future and a past. To know that other people walk through the same life as you and left remnants of that for you. Like you're not just existing alone, like your experience comes from a lineage as well. So to acknowledge that lineage to me was even more powerful, because I was like, wow, like I come from a line of women or a line of people that I've selected for myself. Like I have chosen ancestors, but like even just looking at people like Toni Morrison, like that's an ancestor to me. These are people that have existed and have let me know that like, oh, I'm not alone in this journey of oppression. Like there are people who have fought the fight
with
for you to get to this very point.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like to acknowledge them and to know that you walk into a room and you carry them also.
I think
that to me was so powerful.
I think that's so powerful, and I do hear you say this word collective, and I've always had like a general sense of what the collective means, right? And like the collective despite whatever faith and religion people, because I do feel like there's a collective in everything,
and of course,
right? And like it's unique spiritual.
And to me, I talk about like I try to like on this journey of becoming, I'm trying to transform my me into a we. And this we is ever changing, because you can't always have a fixed collective. Your collective changes based on your positionality in general. There's certain moments where you're going to need a certain type of we in a certain type of space.
That's very valid.
And that's where it becomes even more imaginary as well, because you can't fix a collective. And to me as well, like, it's incredible to know that in imagining a collective, you eventually manifest that. Like, I've witnessed the collective actually materialize for me in ways that I could never even imagine.
And I feel like it's very beautiful. Because, sorry, not to cut you off. I feel like it's very beautiful because you definitely do attract the energy you put into the world.
100.
I don't know why I went underneath to get, but whatever.
Like, people can hear the song that you're singing, and for them to hear it means they identify their voice within that song also. Yes.
I definitely feel like there's something to be said about why, like, faith works regardless of there are all these different spiritual denominations. Exactly. And I feel like it counts for, you can't tell me it doesn't count for something.
100.
You know, like
And that's the thing, like I especially look at America for an example of how the moment you materialize forms of radical Black collectivity, it becomes a site for state surveillance and violence.
Yeah. And
so it's not easy for us to actually collectivize and exist in a particular space, especially let's say queer people in Nigeria, like to actually materialize together as a peoples in one place is just allowing for violence or state violence, you know. So sometimes I feel like the collective is almost safer in the imaginary sphere because there's no actual or even just on the internet too.
Yeah.
That's really exists also.
Yeah. I feel like I find that I've met the most and I've experienced the most community experiences on the internet.
Yeah, my collective developed on the internet. But then that again, like, eventually materializes into small pockets. But I'm still very, very skeptical of the idea of like trying to materialize a whole collective, because again, surveillance is very real. Like the moment you actually collectivize and gather in a space and you decide this is your space, even looking at Fela's Kalakuta Republic, that was a man that declared an independent nation state within Nigeria. But like that was a place of active police brutality.
I guess
and
the
violence.
question is, at what point does the cycle end? Because we still do have to. Oh, also, yeah, your tattoo's done.
I was like, wait.
Your tattoo's done.
So
I already saw them doing the thing that babes do whenever they get new nails, right? And they're like,
No, you know, like already when you were doing it, I was like, my hands just stretched
just
out.
so
like,
cute. Whatever.
I was so irritating.
I'm so dead. Don't kill me. But I feel like with the conversation about like, you know, the collective manifesting in physicality, I feel like as much as they are policed and they are like we are surveilled. Like surveilled, it's like, what else? Like, you know, like sometimes it's really a matter of like, we still do have to do these things. Like we still do have to, like, you know, and I feel like,
but that's where the negotiation comes in.
That's
right?
true.
Like, I'd like to say that I feel like I exist in a time where there's so many people dreaming of commune. There's so many people dreaming of living outside the conditions of our current system. Like, I know people that just want to be in nature and in like literal community, just sustaining themselves from land in a respectful way, like, and also allowing for their own fluid forms of existence. And to me, that's a collective dream that's so powerful to like just be dreaming already. And I feel like it's just an active participation of wanting to reach that point. Like, back to radical hope as well, you know, and again, it's like we're going to have to find our strategies and forms of existing together in ways that can subvert the system. But again, it's like, it's a developing language.
It's
and we
always,
also have to look to the past as well to see how those collectives existed. But it's also like you can't even apply permanency to it as well.
Because it's always changing.
It's always changing. So it's like we have to redevelop our languages for collectivity, for linearity, for permanency, and also for organization and structure. Because the moment you apply organization, I feel like, onto the idea of a collective, like that in itself is a burden, or like it's a form of oppression, because organization carries like ration, or also carries
it can be difficult to maintain.
Exactly. And it also allows for hierarchies and structure, and the structure of power.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of a collective materialization that isn't really centered on some type of leader, or, you know, like it doesn't have. It's
just kind of anarchist in form.
It's a circle,
like commune,
community.
Because I find that that's also what happened. Like, let's look at like the Black Panther.
Yes,
right. They took Fred Hampton out, and like that. Not that was it,
exactly.
But like at the same time, like we could start seeing an active fall of the idea of liberation now.
Exactly. Like the moment we start to spearhead movements with like a person or an icon, we like, I mean, MLK like is sold now. Like we've commodified
100%,
leaders to
100%.
become sensational people that have existed throughout history.
Like,
and they
almost celebs.
Yeah, like celebrities, and they almost become like fictitious almost, you know, like they didn't exist. Meanwhile, it's like a movement is a movement. It's not just one person. But I feel like we like to do this thing of like, we need a face.
We need a face to
something to cling to. But that's like, I think it's internalized forms of like needing for power.
Yeah, like I feel like there's a need to like decolonize our idea of what movements can be like, because that's actually what they do. They mostly get the figurehead, and that's it.
And it silences the multiplicity of the movement. And I love to always say I'm carrying a we. Like that's why to me, like I'm trying to transition my me into a we, some type of way. Like even being non-binary to me is more so like a signifier of just being multiplicit. Like I carry ancestors, I carry generations, and I'm always aware that the space that I'm in is not just me in this space. Like I carry voices of so many other people, but it's to also
loved ones, everyone.
Exactly, and it's also acknowledge I can't speak for all of them, but I can acknowledge that there are more voices to my voice.
I agree with that.
And you can't like sensationalize my voice or make it like the entire totality of like
of what that means.
Exactly.
I think that's very beautiful. I think I kind of want to pull the conversation as we're coming to a close back to the idea of tattoos, right? And like how you feel like you've used customizing your personal body and your like, you know, using like all these choosing your agency and using your agency.
Choosing agency.
What do your tattoos mean to you?
Yeah, my first tattoo is actually half of
a yellow sun.
Yes, the rising sun, symbol of Biafra. And to me, it was more so a commemorative thing, an acknowledgement that my father survived this war. And my father definitely has PTSD from his own experience and embodiment of this war. Some people are like, oh, does this mean you support this? Does this? For me, it's like, no, already it's rooted in commemoration. But like the moment I got it, I was like, wow. Like, it felt so powerful on the basis of, I like the idea of being able to materialize my own identity onto my own body. Like, everything is so symbolic and meaningful. And I love symbols. I love meaning. I love, like, further, like, expressing my inner being. So to me, it was just so, like, oh, wow, like, I can really communicate my politics onto my own body. Like, the agency of that, like, existence is so incredible.
I feel like it's very amazing to see how you have chosen yourself, and in every tattoo you choose yourself. I feel like something that people don't talk about enough is how tattoos are gender affirming care, right? And like gender in the sense of your identity, just how you present, like not like, let's take femininity and masculinity out of it. Like, you know, there's this exercise that I saw on Instagram once, like, if you could describe your gender without using gendered terms, what would you use? And I remember choosing something along the lines of chaos, brightness, mystery, you know, like how do you manifest, how do you interact with the world without having to give man-woman vibes, like, you know. And I feel
without having to categorize yourself.
And I feel like tattoos are another way of that. And, you know, and it feels like, based off of like what you're saying, like I can see like a connection of like how will I feel? Like, you know, it's affirming me and it's affirming how I identify.
It's a militancy as well. Yeah, back to like different languages, and I feel like what you're describing here is like tattooing is definitely a language for something. And I also feel like you don't have to explain that language to other people. Like, I don't really, like, people ask, oh my god, your tattoos, and to me it's like, it's not really the conversational point per se. Like, I already know what it means, so I don't really feel like telling people what it means.
You don't feel a need.
No, I don't feel an obligation either.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's real. Yeah,
and even with Uli arts, like Uli art was definitely something decorative as well. So tattoos don't necessarily have to have like a deep meaning per se. Like, these were symbols of the earth that people were putting onto their bodies. And that to me was so like, wow, things like symbols rooted in nature and life, and like that just being applied to decorate your body.
Stomach growling, I'm so sorry.
So yeah, it's also like, wow, like a connection to like the earth, also like through Igbo Uli arts as well.
I think that's so beautiful. Like, I feel like you've given me like a lot to go home and think about. I'm definitely going to be whipping out the journal tonight. I feel like 100%. I'm definitely going to be whipping out the journal tonight. I just really want to like appreciate you and appreciate you for taking the time to do this. I feel like like I said, I have been a fan for a while, and I've been a fan of just even watching, even though like we do have very complex relationships with social media, you know, very, very complex. But I feel like following your social media has given me so much encouragement and given me so much power to just, bro, like, it's my space. It's actually my space.
I think something to heavily emphasize in this journey of becoming is, I hope I can become myself so others can become themselves also. Like, everyone has a destiny. And I think it's so beautiful to know that the journey of becoming yourself is a lifelong journey, and no one can show you but you. And I think there's so much power and agency in knowing that you literally have everything you need within yourself and via your own lineage and via your own future as well. And it's like, wow, like, for me to exist in a world where other people are themselves so I can become even more of myself, like, there's no like standard.
It's stunning.
There's nothing to like aspire towards other than what's within. And that's so like,
what you feel like you can be, it is. It is. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for really giving me so much language today. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
I hope you love.
No, I love it so much.
Yeah.
Like, this is the buzz down.
I'm so dead. Okay, thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy.
Also,
that us really like matching. Do you get what I mean?
But even as I said, like, I think it's even more powerful that you literally had your palm over mine as we were doing this. So to me, that was like such a very important like physical aspect of this transaction, and even more like, I don't know, reaffirming of like both our destinies as well.
Thank you.
So
I received that.
Very blessed. No,
I really do
sure.
receive that. Thank you so much.
It's powerful.
She of the sun for real, man. The sun.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. And I feel like, we can cut it. How's it feeling, by the way? You are taking this thing like a child.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I just pretend it's not.